Welcome back to Health Data Ethics. I'm your host, Jenny Owens, and today I've got a behind the scenes episode. We're not going to talk about regulation. We're not going to talk about algorithms. This is really a story about process, specifically my process to produce this podcast and what happened when I tried to improve it. So just to set the stage, I have a running GPT project that gives me a weekly roundup of regulatory news. It's a set of updates and articles, FDA guidance, EU updates, academic reviews, the occasional editorial piece, and all of this is designed to sort of deliver me stuff that I might want to think about for podcast content. It's helpful sometimes. Sometimes I pull things from my work or my personal conversations, but it's nice to have something delivered every week that's going to be a reliable source of things to at least think about. Maybe I read an article or two. If I like it, sometimes I'll ask my trained ChatGPT to help me draft a script. This is fine. It works fine. But what I wanted was to have the scripts that are generated be closer to the final product that I'm aiming for and require fewer rounds of editing in between. So yesterday, and for those of you playing along at home, I'm recording this on Sunday. That means yesterday is Saturday. I'm taking time out of my weekend, and I probably took 90 minutes to sit down and do this thing that I've been meaning to do for months. And I did a tone reference and a tone documentation exercise. So I documented how I approach topics. What kind of questions do I tend to ask? Where are my priorities? How do I organize information if I'm writing a podcast script? What's going to be first? What's going to be second? How do I wrap things up? What words do I over rely on? To be fair, what words do I rarely use because they don't go with how I think? Things are never quietly revolutionizing anything. That's an AI thing. That's not me. I gave it examples of some of my own scripts to compare with the scripts that it had generated so it could see how they differed. It was a lot more work than I expected, but it felt good. I was really proud of the work I had done by the end of that. Like I was really working with this tool to develop something that was going to be more successful. So I continued on, blazed forward, pulled an article from the latest news roundup. This is an article that discussed FDA and the European Medicines Agency guidance related to AI and machine learning and drug development. I thought this is going to be fun. I don't know much about this. I will learn something new. I thought it was going to be fun. I went and pulled the actual guidance from FDA.gov and loaded that PDF in. And then I asked my ChatGPT to search PubMed for a review on how AI is currently being used in drug development because I don't know much about this and I needed to learn something new. I wanted to match up the guidance with what is actually happening today in the field. So ChatGPT came back with a citation. I checked it out. It looked plausible. It had a free PDF. Thank you very much to those of you who make your PDFs free on PubMed. So I grabbed that, pulled that, loaded that in as well. I asked the model to write a podcast script using those sources. I said, I want you to match up the FDA guidance with what's currently happening in the field, and please use my tone, just like we spent all this time documenting. And the script that I ended up with, I loved it. It was a great script. It was clear. It was on topic. For every piece of the FDA guidance, it was matched with a chunk from the review. I thought, this is great. This might be the week I finally get ahead of schedule. And so my plan was to fact check it today, record this afternoon, and for once, maybe not be editing at midnight on Tuesday when I generally release podcasts on Wednesday. So today, very enthusiastic, sat down. I'm ready to fact check. This is going to be so quick that I'm going to be able to record. This will take no time at all. So my first sign that something was wrong was the list of 10 FDA and EMA guidelines cited in the script didn't match the guidelines that were actually in the PDF. They were made up. The first one was correct, but the rest were plausible sounding nonsense. The statements that those fake guidelines were matched with about specific AI techniques in drug discovery, many of them were not present in the review article. My script drew conclusions about the role of AI in components of the drug development pipeline, like toxicity prediction and virtual screening, that were not supported by the review. My script mentioned databases and approaches that were not present in the text. So what I had, although it looked like a script, it wasn't really a script. It was a good approximation of what a good script might sound like, but it didn't actually engage with the materials at all. It was a very convincing forgery. And if I had recorded that and I had run it, I would not have been happy. And I understand that very few people out there are listening to this podcast and fact checking what I'm saying. And then that's fine. It's not about disappointing specific people. It's about upholding my own editorial standards. My assignment here today is not to produce 10 to 15 minutes a week of plausible AI and healthcare noises for you. It is to actually engage with the news, the regulation, the source material, to break it down and to give you food for thought that's based in reality about how you want to govern and use AI in your own organization. If what I'm producing isn't real, then I am undercutting my own credibility and I'm not contributing to an environment of trust. I'm asking you to trust AI for patient care. How can I do that if you can't even trust what AI says when it reads an article and tells you is the point? I will not do that. I will always be fact-checking, always be standing personally behind the content that I produce. I took this script and I spent probably 45 minutes trying to salvage it. I reran the prompts and I told it, please don't make things up, cite your sources. It hallucinated the sources. It told me confidently that a particular thing was located on page 6 of this PDF. It was in this section. The section didn't even exist. I clarified the source, re-uploaded the PDFs. I asked for different citations. I worked with my tuning on my PDF just to say, please turn down the hallucination. All that work that we did on tone, are you maybe prioritizing fluency over accuracy? How do we make sure that we're getting this balanced? I did all of this trying to avoid this thing that I could still see happening every time I regenerated the script, still hallucinations. And my GPT was apologetic. Every single time I'd say, wait a minute, where is this sentence in the paper? And it'd say, oh, I'm sorry, it wasn't really there. I promise not to do it again. And so I would redo it and then it would come up with something else that was equally unsubstantiated. I'm not telling you the story because I'm mad. That's a lie. I'm a little bit mad. You should see the text messages I exchanged with my husband, who also works in artificial intelligence. But I am telling you the story because this is exactly why I start to get itchy when I see text or documents that have these kind of fingerprints of large language model generation. That smooth cadence, the confidence, this clean summary of something that is messy. When you do the kind of work that we do, when you work in clinical or regulatory domains, sounding right and sounding confident is not the same thing as being right. And sounding right can be actively dangerous because it's so seductive. It lulls you into that algorithmic bias. It delays your skepticism. And skepticism is a key component of a healthy AI environment. That script fooled me, briefly, because it sounded like me. And I really wanted it to be true. I wanted a shortcut to learning about AI and drug development so I could share it with you because I was really excited. And it just wasn't meant to be. So here's my takeaway. Here's my action item for this particular podcast. If you're building with these tools, you need a layer that flags and fact checks what wasn't in the source. You need a way to say, hey, this draft is good, but what about this is true? Right now, for me, that layer is human. I'm the human in the loop. Maybe someday soon I won't be. I will try again next week, and I am keeping the tone file because that work was very successful. But I will never publish anything that I wouldn't defend in a room full of clinicians with questions. And just in case you're curious, here's the deal with FDA and the EMA. In January 2026, just last month, FDA and EMA, that's the European Medicines Agency, jointly released a high-level guidance called Guiding Principles of Good AI Practice in Drug Development. It's a very cool blueprint for how these two regulatory agencies are thinking about AI practice, and it's important because it marks an area of agreement between two huge regulatory bodies on the use of AI. We know AI is already being used across drug discovery pipelines, especially for target identification, virtual screening, compound generation, and toxicity modeling. So it's nice to see that the US and the EU agree that these approaches should be handled carefully. They gave a list of 10 clear principles. I find it hard to improve on the document as written, that the use of AI in drug development should be human-centric by design. AI should support patients, scientists, and clinicians, not displace them. We should have a risk-based approach. Our validation and the level of rigor that we're probing should scale with risk. So for virtual screening, less risk, right? We're generating a pick list of targets that we might want to investigate further. But when you're doing something like toxicity modeling, you're going to want to back that up with an in vivo study just to make sure that you're not predicting something that doesn't actually turn out to be the biological truth. Number 3, adherence to standards. So this means integrating AI validation with existing good practices. So good legal practices, ethical, technical, cybersecurity, regulatory standards. If you're used to like good clinical practice or good manufacturing practice, you're familiar with this. They argue that we should have a clear context of use. So we should have a specific role for artificial intelligence, a specific scope, and a good rationale for why it's being used. They also, number 5, argue that expertise in both AI and that context of use from number 4 must be present throughout the technology's lifecycle. So we can't have machine learning experts alone working on these things. They need to be paired with somebody who has pharmacological expertise, for example. Data governance and documentation. Good practices include documenting data provenance, processing steps, and analytical decisions. Consideration for privacy and protection of data should be maintained regardless of the tech that you're using. Number 7, model design best practices. Model design and drug discovery should follow best practices for model design and software engineering elsewhere. Models should be built using data that is appropriate, and they should be developed in a way that promotes transparency, reliability, and anti-fragility. Number 8, a risk-based performance assessment. So performance assessment should be done with a desire to mitigate as much risk as possible. So when you're thinking about performance, reducing your risk is an important part of that performance. Number 9, lifecycle management. Same with quality management. It should be designed to capture, assess, and address issues, always with a goal to reducing the risk. And then number 10, clear communication. You have to be able to use plain language to communicate with your intended audience about your AI tools. That means not only your scientists, but also your clinicians and your patients. Until next week, I'm Jenny Owens, a little bit frustrated, still human. Thank you for listening.